Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Just close them. And I want you to think about the last time you changed something about yourself. Something real, something that mattered to you. Not because you wanted to change it, but because someone else wanted you to. Maybe you laughed differently because someone said your laugh was too loud. Maybe you stopped talking about a dream because someone rolled their eyes when you mentioned it. Maybe you stayed in a relationship longer than you should have, smiled when you didn't feel like smiling, shrunk yourself down to fit into a space that was never built for you in the first place. Go ahead, think about it. Now open your eyes. That thing you just thought of, that moment of contorting yourself, of making yourself smaller, of swallowing your truth to make someone else comfortable. TSAT is what we are here to talk about today. Because that moment wasn't just a moment. That moment was a symptom. It was a symptom of something that millions of people are walking around with every single day, something that is quietly draining the life out of them, something that looks harmless from the outside, but is absolutely devastating on the inside. And that thing is the addiction. Yes, I am calling it an addiction. The addiction to love and approval. Now, before anyone in this room gets defensive, before anyone thinks this doesn't apply to them, let me just say something clearly. This is not about whether you are weak or strong, smart or foolish, successful or struggling. Some of the most accomplished people I have ever met, people with degrees on their walls and awards on their shelves, are completely and utterly enslaved to what other people think of them. The prison of approval doesn't care about your credentials. It doesn't care about your job title. It is an equal opportunity captor, and it takes brilliant, beautiful, capable people and slowly, quietly, convincingly teaches them that their worth depends on external validation. And that's the trick, isn't it? It convinces you. It whispers so softly that you don't even hear it as a lie. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like humility. I just care about what others think. I'm just being considerate. I just want to be loved. And who could argue with wanting to be loved? Love is not the problem. The desire to connect is not the problem. The problem, and I need you to really hear this, is when your sense of self, your identity, your decisions, your direction becomes contingent on whether or not someone else approves of it. That is where love stops being a gift and starts being a leash. I remember reading about a psychological study conducted by Solomon Asch back in the 1950s. Asch put a group of people in a room and showed them a simple picture, just lines on a card. One line was clearly longer than the others, obvious to anyone with functioning eyes. And yet, when the other people in the room, who were secretly part of the experiment, confidently said the wrong answer, a significant portion of the real participants went along with it. They cared about the answer was wrong. They could see it. But because the group said otherwise, they doubted themselves. They overrode their own perception. They chose social acceptance over their own truth. Now you might be thinking, well, that's just a study. That's just about lines on a card. But let me ask you something. How many times have you known something was right for you? In your gut, in your bones, in that quiet place where the real you lives. And you overrode it because someone else said otherwise. How many careers have gone unlived because a parent said it wasn't practical? How many relationships have been entered or stayed in because leaving would mean disappointing someone? How many opinions have been swallowed? How many voices have been silenced? How many lives have been lived at half volume because someone somewhere once made you feel that your full self was too much? This is the real cost, not the cost in dollars, not the cost in reputation, the cost in CLF, the cost in the irreplaceable, non-renewable resource of your one and only life. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Maria. Maria grew up in a household where love was conditional, not in a dramatic, obvious way. Her parents weren't monsters. They were people doing the best they could with what they had. But the unspoken message Maria received from a very early age was this: when you perform well, we are happy. When we are happy, you are loved. When you are loved, you are safe. And her young, brilliant brain did what all young, brilliant brains do. It learned the lesson. It learned that love was something you earned, that approval was the currency of safety. And so Maria spent the next 3 decades of her life in a relentless, exhausting, soul-crushing pursuit of that currency. She became excellent at everything she did. Not because she loved it, not because it fulfilled her, but because excellence brought approval, and approval felt like love, and love felt like safety. She got the grades, she got the job, she got the relationship, not the right relationship, but the one that looked right, the one that everyone else thought was a great match. And from the outside, Maria's life looked incredible. From the inside, Maria told me she felt like she was slowly disappearing. And here is what broke my heart when she said it. She said, I realized one day that I had never, not once, made a major decision in my life based on what I actually wanted. Every single choice was made based on what would get me the most approval. And I didn't even know who I was anymore, because I had never taken the time to find out. That, right there, is the ultimate consequence of chasing love and approval. Not rejection, not failure, not embarrassment. The ultimate consequence is that you lose yourself. You lose the thread that connects you to your own life. And then one day you wake up, and the face in the mirror is a stranger wearing your name. Now I want to talk about where this comes from, because I am a firm believer that you cannot fix what you don't understand. And this need for approval is not a character flaw. I want to be crystal clear about that. It is a deeply human, deeply wired, entirely understandable response to the conditions of being alive. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings survived in tribes. And in those tribes, being accepted wasn't just nice, it was necessary. Being cast out of the tribe meant death. Rejection was a life or death situation. So our nervous systems evolved to treat social rejection the way they would treat a physical threat. The same part of the brain that registers physical pain registers social exclusion. That's not metaphor. That's neuroscience. When someone rejects you or withholds their approval, your brain genuinely experiences it as danger. So the first thing I need you to do is have some compassion for yourself. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are human, and your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is that we are living in 2024 with a brain that was optimized for 100,000 BC. The tribe has changed. The stakes have changed. And the definition of survival has changed. You are not going to be eaten by a predator if your coworker doesn't like your presentation. You are not going to be cast out into the wilderness if your mother-in-law disapproves of your parenting choices. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain responds the same way to both. And because of that, millions of people are living in a constant low-grade state of anxiety, performing their lives rather than living them, monitoring every room they walk into for signs of approval or disapproval, measuring their worth in likes and comments and nods and smiles. Here is something I need you to write down if you have something to write with. And if you don't, I need you to burn this into your memory. Your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to see it. Read that again. Your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to see it. A diamond does not become less valuable because someone doesn't recognize it. A song is not less beautiful because someone doesn't stop to listen. Wow, you are not less worthy of love, of respect, of a full and meaningful life because someone has not chosen to see what is there. The problem is that we have outsourced the appraisal of our own value to people who are often not qualified to give it. Think about who you have been seeking approval from. Really think about it. Is it someone who has done the inner work? Is it someone who is living with integrity, with self-awareness, with genuine wisdom? Or is it someone who is themselves carrying wounds, projections, insecurities, and fears? Because here's the truth. The people most likely to withhold approval are the people who were never taught to approve of themselves. Hurt people, as they say, hurt people. And people who have never been unconditionally loved have a very hard time giving unconditional love. So when you give someone else the power to determine your worth, you are often handing that power to someone who cannot wield it wisely. You are asking someone who is starving to feed you. There is a story about the great poet Rumi, one of the most profound human beings who ever walked this earth, and how when he first began to write and share his work, there were people in his circles who mocked him, who dismissed him, who said his ideas were too mystical, too ungrounded, too strange. And Rumi, rather than shrinking, rather than adjusting his work to earn their approval, simply continued to pour himself onto the page. He said, and I am paraphrasing here, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. He understood something that took me years to understand, that the most profound version of you will always be too much for the people who are not ready to receive it. And that is not your problem to solve. Let me talk about social media for a moment, because we cannot have this conversation in the modern age without talking about the digital approval machine. You know what I am talking about? The little heart, the little thumbs up, the number that climbs or doesn't climb after you post something. And I am not here to demonize social media. Tools are neutral, it's what we do with them that matters. But I want you to be honest with yourself about your relationship with it. Do you post something and then find yourself checking every few minutes to see how it performed? Do you feel a genuine shift in your mood? You pee when the likes come in, do when they don't. Have you ever deleted a post because it didn't get the response you hoped for? Have you ever crafted a version of your life online that is not quite the real version because the real version doesn't seem to perform as well? If any of that is resonating with you, and I suspect it is for more people in this room than will openly admit it, then you are not alone. Research from the University of Michigan found that the more time people spent on social media, the worse they felt about themselves and their lives. And the mechanism is exactly what we're talking about today: external validation. The human brain, remember, is wired to seek approval. Social media has taken that ancient drive and turbocharged it, gamified it, and monetized it. It has created an environment where your value is literally quantified in public, in real time, and updated constantly. And we wonder why anxiety is at historic highs. We wonder why depression is rising. We are doing to our own nervous systems what we would never do to our own bodies. Imagine if every time you stepped outside, a screen appeared above your head with a number on it representing how attractive and interesting the people around you found you, and that number updated every hour. That would be considered torture. And yet we carry it in our pockets willingly. The antidote, and this is the heart of what I want to give you today. The antidote is not to stop caring about connection. The antidote is not to become hard, cold, indifferent to the world around you. That is not strength. That is armor. And armor is heavy, and it keeps the bad things out, but it also keeps the good things out. Real mental strength, the kind I am talking about, is not about building walls. It is about building an internal foundation so solid, so rooted, so deeply yours, that the outside world can move and shift and opine and judge without sweeping you off your feet. Think of a tree. When a storm comes, a rigid tree, one that refuses to bend, snaps under the pressure. But a deeply rooted tree, a tree that has sent its roots down into the earth where nothing can reach them, bends in the storm. It sways. It moves. But it does not break and it does not fall because its foundation is deeper than the storm can reach. That is what we are building today. We are building roots. So how do you do it? How do you actually build that kind of internal foundation? Because I know it is not enough to just say, stop caring what others think. If it were that easy, nobody would struggle with it. I've watched motivational videos that say, just stop seeking approval. And I always think, yes, thank you. I'll add that to my to-do list right after. Just be happy and just relax. It doesn't work that way. Real change requires real tools, real understanding, and real practice. So let me give you some of both. The first thing you have to do is start telling the truth to yourself, not to the world. Not in a dramatic, oversharing, burning bridges way. Just quietly, privately, honestly start telling yourself the truth about what you want, about what you feel, about what matters to you, about what doesn't. Because here is what I have found: most people who are addicted to external validation have stopped trusting their internal compass. They've overridden it so many times in favor of what other people want that it has grown faint. Like a radio station you've drifted away from. You can still hear it if you get quiet enough, but the static of other people's opinions is louder. Journaling is one of the most powerful tools for this. Not journaling where you write what you think a journal is supposed to say. Real journaling. Unfiltered, ugly, honest journaling. Sit down with a blank page and ask yourself, what do I actually want? What am I pretending to want because it's what's expected? What would I do if I knew no one would judge me for it? What have I given up in the pursuit of someone else's approval? The answers might surprise you. They might even frighten you. Good. Fear is often the feeling that surrounds the most important truths. The second thing, and this might be the most counterintuitive thing I say today, is to get comfortable with disapproval. Not indifferent to it. Comfortable with it. Because the fear of disapproval is often not about the disapproval itself. It's about what you have told yourself the disapproval may ends. If your boss expresses dissatisfaction with your work, that is information. Useful practical information. But many of us don't receive it as information. We receive it as a verdict on our worth as a human being. Our brain translates, my boss is unhappy with this report, into, I am fundamentally inadequate as a person. And because the stakes feel existential, we will do anti-chain to avoid the possibility of that experience, including shrinking, including hiding, including never taking the kind of risks that would allow us to fully live. I want you to start doing what therapists sometimes call practicing disapproval. Start small. Leave a dish in the sink and let someone be mildly annoyed. Share an opinion that you know is not popular and see that the earth does not crack open beneath your feet. Wear something you love even if you know it will raise eyebrows. Say no to something you don't want to do and sit with discomfort of someone being disappointed. Each of these small acts is a reprogramming. Each one is your nervous system learning slowly that disapproval is survivable, that you will not be cast out of the tribe, that the world keeps turning even when someone is unhappy with you. There is a quote, and this one I carry with me like a lantern in dark places, from the great Brené Brown, who has spent her career studying vulnerability and courage. She said that you cannot get to courage without walking through vulnerability. And I want to add something to that today. You cannot get to freedom without walking through the fire of disapproval. Every person you have ever admired for their courage, every person who built something extraordinary, who stood for something real, who changed something that needed changing, every single one of them was disapproved of. Loudly. By people who were very certain they were wrong. Abraham Lincoln was considered by many of his contemporaries to be too radical, too unpolished, too soft. Oprah Winfrey was told by an early television producer that she was unfit for television. Steve Jobs was fired from the company he built. And those are just the famous examples. Think about every ordinary person you know who made an extraordinary choice, left the safe job, ended the wrong relationship, started the business everyone said would fail, moved to the city everyone said was too ambitious. Every single one of them faced disapproval. Every single one of them had to make a choice, my approval or my life. Because here is what no one tells you. When you are growing up, you cannot have both. You cannot fully and fearlessly live your life and guarantee the approval of everyone around you. Those two things are fundamentally incompatible. A life lived for approval is a performance. And performances are exhausting. And performances are not yours. And performances eventually end. The real you. The unfiltered, unpolished, sometimes messy, sometimes brilliant, entirely irreplaceable real you. The real you was never meant to be a performance. Now I want to address something specific, because I know it is in this room, even if no one has said it yet. I want to address the people who have been chasing the approval of a specific person, a parent, a romantic partner, a close friend, because this kind of approval seeking is the most painful, and in many ways the most damaging, because it is wrapped up in real love and real history and real vulnerability. When you are chasing the approval of someone you genuinely love, it doesn't feel like a character flaw. It feels like devotion. It feels like trying. And that makes it so much harder to recognize and so much harder to release. Let me speak directly to the people who grew up with a parent whose approval felt impossible to earn. Because I know some of you are sitting here right now and you have been carrying this for decades. And no one has ever looked you in the eye and said it was never about you. The love you didn't receive, the approval that was always just out of reach, the moving goalposts, the not quite good enoughs. None of that was a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of their wounds. People can only give what they have. And parents who could not give unconditional approval were not withholding it to punish you. They were empty of it themselves. They never received it, and so they could not pass it on. This does not make it hurt less. I know that. But it changes the meaning, and meaning is everything. If you have spent your life trying to earn the approval of a parent who cannot give it, I want you to hear this gently and clearly. You will never earn it. Not because you are not enough, but because the well is dry. The thing you are looking for does not exist in that place. And every year you spend searching for it, there is a year you are not spending building it within yourself. Psychologist Alice Miller, who wrote so beautifully about childhood wounds and the drama of the gifted child, said that the greatest tragedy is not that we were not loved, but that we often spend our entire lives trying to prove to people who could not love us that we are worthy of love, when the proof was never something we had to construct. It was something we were born with. Let me say something about romantic love and approval, because this is where so many of us get completely turned around. We enter relationships looking for someone to approve of us, in all the ways we have not learned to approve of ourselves. We use romantic love as a kind of therapy, an attempt to heal old wounds through new relationships. And for a while, in the beginning, it often feels like it's working. The intoxication of early love, of being seen and wanted and chosen, is genuinely one of the most powerful feelings a human being can experience. But here's what happens. That initial high fades, as all highs do, and the old hunger reasserts itself. And suddenly you are in a relationship not looking for partnership, but looking for validation. You are not asking, does this person make me better? You are asking, does this person make me feel enough? And relationships built on that question are fragile. Because when the other person, being human, being imperfect, having their own bad days and their own wounds, cannot consistently provide you with the feeling of enoughness, everything goes sideways. You become anxious, clingy, needy in ways that even you recognize but cannot stop. Or you become defensive, unavailable, trying to appear not to need what you are desperate for. And the saddest part, the person you are in the relationship with often doesn't even know what's happening. They don't know they've been hired as your self-esteem manager. They just know that somehow nothing they do is ever quite enough, or that the pressure to be everything for you is slowly crushing them. Real love, healthy love, sustainable love, the kind of love worth having, happens between two people who are already standing on their own ground. Not perfectly, not without wounds or insecurities, but fundamentally, each person has a relationship with themselves that is primary. They know who they are. They have some sense of their own worth that does not entirely depend on what the other person says or does. And from that place, love is a gift freely given rather than a drug desperately needed. From that place, you can be vulnerable without being desperate. You can care without collapsing. You can want love without envying it to survive. The philosopher and psychologist Erich Fromm said it most powerfully. He said that immature love says, I love you because I need you. And mature love says, I need you because I love you. That tiny rearrangement of words contains an entire universe of difference. In the first version, your love is driven by deficiency, by what you lack, by what you are trying to fill. In the second version, your love is driven by abundance, by something already whole choosing to share itself with another whole thing. So how do you get there? How do you build that relationship with yourself that makes healthy love possible? The answer, I believe, begins with a practice that is simple to describe and genuinely difficult to do. The practice is this: stop outsourcing your approval and start earning it from yourself. Start setting standards for yourself, not standards based on what others want, but standards based on what you respect. And then start meeting them, not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently and intentionally. Because here is what I know for certain: the most solid self. Respect is not built through affirmation. It is built through integrity. It is built through the accumulation of small moments where you did what you said you would do, where you kept your word to yourself, where you showed up for your own life in ways that made you privately proud. Think about it this way. The people you most respect in your life, the ones whose approval you actually care about, why do you respect them? Is it because they were always liked? Is it because they made everyone around them comfortable all the time? I doubt it. The people we truly respect are the ones who stand for something, the ones who have a spine and use it, the ones who make hard choices and live with the consequences, the ones who are, in a word, tassel-less, fully and unapologetically themselves, even when that costs something. That is what you respect in others. And that is what you need to build in yourself. Let me tell you about a man I once had the privilege of knowing. His name was Gerald, and he was 72 years old when I met him, and he was one of the most mentally strong human beings I have ever encountered. Not because life had been easy for him, it hadn't. He had been through divorce, bankruptcy, estrangement from his children for several years, health challenges that would have flattened most people. But there was something about Gerald that was absolutely unshakable. A kind of quiet, rooted, unmovable sense of himself that I found almost magnetic. And I asked him about it. I said, "Gerald, how did you get to be this way? When did this happen for you?" And he was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "You know, for most of my life I was in a performance. I was trying to be what my father wanted, then what my wife wanted, then what my business partners wanted. And then one day everything fell apart all at once, and I had nothing left to perform for. No audience. No approval. Just me and a small apartment and a cup of bad coffee. And that was the first time in my life I had to ask myself who I actually was. And you know what I found? I found I quite liked the answer. That is the gift that's hiding inside the experience that many of you are afraid of. The stripping away. The loss of the audience. The moment when there is no one left to perform for and you finally get to find out who you actually are. Some people call it hitting rock bottom. Some people call it a dark night of the soul. I call it the beginning of the real story, because everything before that point, as valuable as it may have been, was in many ways a rehearsal. The real story starts when you stop performing